give you a resume of our life, beginning with Lois. She'll take over first.
I was born in Kansas, in Ellis County, on May 25th, 1902. I was the sixth child in the family, so it wasn't especially important being of that age, but I had 5 older brothers and sisters: Bessie, Leslie, Della, Steve, Ruth, and then me. Then after I was born, Clarence was born. It was supposed to be a Sunday afternoon in the spring, and a very nice day, I hear. But that's all I remember. I don't remember about that part of my life. But the first I remember, we later went to Oklahoma. We were always in Oklahoma. I got very sick. And the first thing I remember in my life was after I got better, of going to the breakfast table with Dad holding one hand and Ruth the other. Ruth was always there. She was always with me in every part of my life, practically. It still is. The next thing I remember was when Clarence was born. My mother called us in to see the baby, and I'll always remember that. Earl, don't you remember something you want to tell now?
Yeah. I was born in, I believe, Ocean, Iowa. I don't remember anything about Ocean, but evidently they moved to Mason City. And I remember several things that happened there. I must have been about 4 or 5. Anyway, my brother Gail and I think we run pretty wild. There was a brickyard there, and we had quite a lot of fun playing around in that brickyard. And I remember railroad tracks that we tried to walk the rails and balance ourselves on the rails. But also, I remember a night one time when we were at the house, and evidently we had a babysitter with us, and we were just monkeying around there, and this girl that was supposed to be taking care of us, she looked over to the door to it was the other part of the house someplace, and she says, "Did you see that doorknob turn?" And about that time, we all saw it, I guess, or thought we did, and we tore out of that house 90 miles an hour. And Gail, that was my brother, he ran a little bit to one side, and he hit a rope that was tied between 2 posts. And boy, did he take a spill. And I don't remember anything more about that.
You didn't tell Earl about
But I should tell you about the family, yeah. My dad his name was Charles Allen, and my mother was Elvie Allen. And then I had a sister, Gladys, who was the oldest. And then Gail, my brother, was 2 years younger. And then I came last. I was 2 years younger than Gail. And I'll let Lois tell about her experiences now.
I remember one time in Christmas time, we didn't really have at that time a Christmas at home, a Christmas tree. Our Christmas was very simple. But we had a Christmas tree. They had one at the schoolhouse. And we all went to it one night, and I had accidentally seen a couple dolls on the foot of my mother's bed. She caught me looking at them, and she didn't like that very well. But that night we went to I don't remember a thing about that. All I could think about was that doll. And then they started giving out presents. And Ruth got a doll, and here I sat with nothing. People all around me were getting presents, and I hadn't gotten anything. Pretty soon I cried out real loud, "Where's my doll?" But it came eventually. And I want to testify that that is the only doll I had till I was 10 years old, 11 years old. And I left the doll in Oklahoma when it came to Idaho, and then I got another one. We lived at that time in the first place Dad bought in Oklahoma. It was over near this schoolhouse, which is Pleasant View. We lived there about 2 years until I guess I was nearly 5 years old. And Dad sold that place and bought another place without any buildings on it. And so he built a barn and then started building a house. And before I got the house done, we moved into the barn. And it rained, it poured, and the barn leaked. He didn't build it to really hold water. It was built for stock. So we all got wet. The beds got a puddle in the middle of them, and I remember Bessie running around with a dishpan on her head. I remember how we slept that night, but we finally the next day was nice with that. But that's where I started school. This was close to Bridgeport. Hinton was about 5 miles away, but Bridgeport was about 2 miles. And that's where I went to school until I was in the 4th grade. But I was 10 years old. And Dad, having been through this country, decided he would like to come to Idaho. He'd come through here at 18 with his folks. And when he got literature about this country having water on it, that time there was no water. When he heard there was water on it, and it was a wonderful place to live, so he couldn't wait till we came to Idaho. Maybe Earl would like to talk a while.
I forgot to say about when we first came to Idaho. There was the 2 girls and Gail and I, the kids, and I don't remember how long Gail was here, but it seemed that he was very hard to handle for my folks. They were used to girls, and to have 2 boys thrown on them all of a sudden, 2 live wire boys that was fresh from the city and knew how to get into things and do things that they shouldn't. Anyway, it got so that they decided that they'd have to send one of us back, and they decided to send Gail back. I remember when a man by Mr. Slingerland came from the children's home in Iowa to pick Gail up. And when he left, he was going up the hill there, and my mother says, "Take a good look at him, Earl. You might not see him for a while." Anyway, I remembered that. And I didn't see him till I was 21 years old. But let's see, to go on. Oh yes, Lois spoke about the Christmas tree they had in Oklahoma and the dolls. But the first Christmas tree that we had in Idaho was, believe me, you can guess what it was. It was a sagebrush. We went out and found a pretty good sized sagebrush. Put it in the living room, or wherever we lived. I forgot whether we lived in a house or... The first house was a tar covered the shack. Not very big. But anyway, we put the Christmas tree up and we decorated it with popcorn strung on, and I think cranberries in between the popcorn. And then we kids made rings out of paper that was joined together, and it was quite pretty, we thought. And we had presents that was sent to us from an aunt of the girls that was in Minnesota, I believe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Minneapolis.
Minneapolis, Minnesota. That's where my mother lived when she was a girl. Anyway, we had so much fun opening those presents from Aunt Lillian. And then, of course, we went on. We moved from that place, like I said. And we lived on Yonderly for, I forgot, I was about 13, I think, when we moved. We moved to a place at Castleford that belonged to my Uncle Philip, my father's brother. And he wasn't farming, he was back in Dakota. He'd gone back there and was renting the place, but we went out there and farmed it. And in May, I believe it was the first year that we farmed it, or the second year, I forgot. But anyway, my father got sick. He had the pneumonia and pleurisy and all, and he finally died. And that was in May. That night, others told me to go down and get Mr. Gibson, who lived about a mile across the fields down north of us, or east of us. So I ran out into the pasture, and I had a horse that I called Nellie, and she was Johnny pretty hard to catch in the daytime, but it was a funny thing, I couldn't understand it. But I went right up to her, and I got on there and rode down there and told Mr. Gibson about it. It was in the night, I don't know, pretty late in the night, that I had to go down there and wake him up, tell him about it, and he came up. And from then on, I don't remember exactly what happened, but anyway, a day or two, we had the funeral in Buell. And it rained that day, and it was very dismal. And the neighbor over west of us, Mr. Glanders, had a car. It seemed like he was the only one with a car in those days. And he said he'd take us to the funeral. No, it wasn't Mr. Glanders, it was Mr. Howard Darrow. Howard Darrow was the one that had the car. Anyway, it was a muddy old road, because in those days we didn't have much pavement, or any pavement, and not too much gravel. But it was a sorrowful time, it seemed like. And then through the summer, I was supposed to, after my dad died, I was supposed to be the man of the house, of the farm. And I was 14 then, and as I remember, and I did the irrigating as such. I don't know what kind of a job I did, but anyway, we had quite a little hay. We cut the hay, and then I had two other neighbors, that Mr. Gibson and Mr. Heidel, that traded work with to put up the hay. One of them stacked the hay, and the other one run the buck rake. And I run the stacker. And we put all three cuttings that way. Can't remember about the rest of the crops, but we didn't stay there because my mother thought it was better to go back on Yonder Lee. So we went back there, and the neighbors had fixed the pasture fence. They'd built a new fence for the pasture. We had 5 or 6 acres of pasture there, and we farmed that place. And Mother and I, we had quite a few apples on the place. I think we we picked the apples, and I don't know, we sold them to somebody, I forgot who it was. Anyway, there was some income there, and then my mother decided to drive the school wagon, and so she'd have some income. And she did that, and of course part of the time I helped. In the meantime, I started school in Buell, and I was in the 9th grade. I graduated out at Sunset View, which was close to where we lived there. And so I started to high school, and I thought farming was more important than going to school. I don't know how long I went, but wasn't there. I quit, and my mother didn't like it very well, but I said I needed to stay home and farm. And, well, I'll let Lois take hold now, her experiences.
I haven't left Oklahoma yet. In my experience, when we were kids, we lived in Oklahoma, and it was Dad had built. He built all the things there, the house, and there was a buggy shed, and a cow shed, and a barn, and all the things. Also, there was a cellar outside, which served both as to put your canned fruit, put your vegetables in, and it was also a cyclone cellar, which Oklahoma had too many cyclones. In fact, there was a cyclone that destroyed a town 14 miles from us the night Clarence was born. So we were always afraid of cyclones, but seldom went to the cyclone cellar until it was one year. I believe it was a year before we came to Idaho. The cyclones were bad. One was within 2 miles of the place that just laid the land low, about a quarter of a mile wide, and I forgot how long it was. It destroyed all the buildings in its path. That was about 2 miles from us, but all the damage it did to us was if it turned your windmill around. You see, you had to have a windmill in Oklahoma to pump your water up. That's the water we had, was from that windmill. And when the fan turned clear around, that was the sign there was a cyclone. So we were in the house waiting, and the house shivered, and we tried to get out of the house, but we couldn't even open the doors. The pressure was so great from the cyclone. Still, I remember how frightened. My dad and Steve were in town about that time, so the rest of us were out there. But I remember much of going to church and to school. Our church was important, but while there were many Negroes in that town, there were no Negroes came to our church. They had a church of their own. Also, they had their own schoolhouse, the Negroes, and didn't mingle with the white people. They were allowed to, I guess. That was just the way they did. Then across the river, which we lived on the South Canadian River, across the river were the Indians. They came to town sometimes, and it always seemed strange to us that the men wore their hair in long braids and a hat, and with their coats they wore a blanket around their, which wouldn't look too unusual today, I guess, with blankets around them. When the mother wanted to take care of her children, she laid the blanket down in the middle of the street and took care of her baby or her children and sat on it. That's the way she rested. But we took all those things for granted because we got used to them. I can remember many programs there in that little church in Oklahoma. That was quite an experience. Then Dad had it in his mind. Well, first, I didn't tell you who my mother and father were. My father's name was George Alpheus Brad. And my mother was Carrie Elizabeth. She was Carrie Elizabeth Belding before she married my father. But she never did like to be called Carrie. She never let anybody call her Carrie. She was always Mrs. Brad to everybody. I can remember out of interesting time. Ruth and Clarence and I would play together. Sometimes Steve was with us, but he was too big to play with us most of the time. But we had lots of fun, and we imitated, when we were little, we imitated church services because that was the most important thing we went to. Now Clarence always liked to be the preacher. We always had lots of kittens we called our children, and we dressed them up and went to church. But Clarence always had a box he stood on, and he liked to preach. Earl said, wouldn't it have been fun if we could have had a recording of some of those sermons. But then Dad, who had gone through this country, they had started from Missouri and had gone by wagon train from Missouri to Pendleton. And we have a story Uncle Will wrote. Okay, he wrote the trip out there. But Dad, when he heard about this place, this country having water on it, see, it was completely desert until they built Milner Dam and put water out in the canals to water this country. When he heard about that, he just couldn't stand it. He wanted to come back to it because he'd seen it when it was dry. And he always had a feeling he wanted to go west. And he didn't like it in Oklahoma at all. It was too hot. So he rented our place to my brother-in-law, Dallas' husband, Andy Thomason. Bessie had married too, and she had a husband, Sidney Gilmore, and a stepson, Earl. So he wrote about this out here, and finally we sold off everything. All we brought with us was 2 trunks, our bedding, and the clothes we wore, and our silverware. I believe there's a couple dishes that we brought. And I'll never forget leaving Oklahoma. I felt bad about leaving my sisters there, Bessie and Bella, and I felt bad leaving the place. I was kind of a sentimentalist, I guess. But as we left the place, Clarence and I waved goodbye, cried a little, and felt bad about leaving it. When 5 o'clock in the morning, we were going to catch the train. And we had the trunks and all of us in the wagon, and Andy took us in the train and that. So while we were in Oklahoma, we always had a carriage. That's the way we traveled. And I guess that was the last carriage we ever had. Then we had a buggy that we went to school in. And old Black Bess was always our buggy horse, the kids' horse to take to school. We all got so we could hitch her up and drive her. But in the meantime, about that time, cars came into the country. And they just scared the horses to death. I remember one time coming home from school, and I saw a car coming down the road from Hinton, and it was a bright red car with all kind of gold color trim. Oh, it was flashy. And when old Black Bess saw that car coming down the road, she was so scared, she stood straight up on her hind legs and would have gone back into the car, I guess. In the buggy, I mean. But Steve got out of the buggy and fastened her to a fence post till the car got by. Or he held her bit so that she couldn't raise up. But cars were quite a thing. I can't remember whether we ever had a ride in a car in Oklahoma or not. It seems as though we did once, but I can't remember what it was. Then when we came to Idaho, we came on a train, and we came as far as Kansas, Ellis, Kansas. That's where my grandmother lived. My grandfather had died. My grandmother and Uncle Will and Uncle Lou lived together in I thought it was quite a nice house. They had beautiful furnishings, and grandmother was quite a cookie baker and quite a fussy person. She had a beautiful parlor, which nobody ever sat in, but everybody always lived in the dining room, and it had a big cabinet in it. It was had a place in the back that reached clear through, and there was a great big place that she kept cookies. And it must have held 20 dozen cookies in that. But anyway, when we stayed with Grandma, I always slept with Grandma at night because she had 3 or 4 bedrooms, and Ruth and Alberta stayed in one bedroom and my folks in another. And I don't know where Clarence, the boys were. They had a special place for them, but I always slept with Grandma. And she always was afraid I was cold, and she kept putting covers on me, and I never came so near suffocating in all my life. But I got acquainted with Earl's dad's only sister, Ellie, and her husband, John, and her children. I don't remember many, but Cecil and Gladys. And later they came through Idaho on their way to Utah, and all became Mormons, I guess.
Okay.
Then we came on, after 2 weeks visiting there, we came on to Idaho on the train. And Grandma had cooked us a great big lunch. They don't do that anymore, but we had a lunch of fried chicken and sandwiches and I suppose cookies. I don't remember anything else. And they were delicious, but before we got to Idaho, I got rather tired of that cold lunch. It was a great big box because you see there were 5 of us. But Dad always told us about the mountains, and we kept looking for the mountains. And then one time when it was night, we got into the mountains, and we never did see them. We got into Denver and had to change trains to come on to Twin Falls.
You'd tell about the clouds, and you thought was a mountain.
No, I didn't tell about that. I'm looking for the mountains that were cloud we saw. We said, Dad, is that the mountains? He said, no. And we watched for them all the way and never did see them. Then I remember.
You finally passed through them at night.
Yeah, we passed through them at night and got into Denver. And somehow or other, we didn't seem to see many of the mountains at any time. Because it was in the middle of the night, we were at Denver, and then we came on in the night until we got to, I can't remember, Cheyenne. I don't remember seeing the mountains much.
There weren't many mountains in Cheyenne.
I just remember a lot of sagebrush. I'd never seen sagebrush before. And I really got tired of looking at sagebrush.
Sit up closer.
Then we got to Twin Falls on Saturday night. And there was a man met us at the station. No, we didn't have a car or anything. He just met us at the station and walked us to a hotel, which was about 2 or 3 blocks from the railroad station, where we spent the night. And in the morning, we got up, the folks went right to work. They walked up to I have to make sure the night before, we just walked uptown in Twin Falls. And we lived by quite small towns in Oklahoma. And when we got to Twin Falls, we walked uptown. And Idaho Power was really showing its stuff that time. There were more lights and advertisements out. We thought it was very beautiful. But on Saturday, I said we got in Twin on Saturday. We got on Friday night. On Saturday, my mother and father went uptown and found real estate and rented a house over on Blue Lakes Boulevard. It was up toward Kimberly Road, but it was near Bickle School. They rented a house, and then they bought enough furniture to go in it. It was very sparse what they bought. Enough beds, and a table and chairs and a stove. Only the necessities and a set of dishes and a few pots and pans. And we lived there. That was in early part of September. And we started to school there. And we went to the Bickle School. Steve was in high school. The rest of us went to Bickle School. Then about February, Dad rented a place in the country. It was about a mile from Snake River. It was out Blue Lakes, about 2 miles, and then about a half a mile east, not far from the river, and not far from where Aunt Hazel lived. And I think she was the first neighbor we knew. Should I go on from here?
Well, I can say a few things. I wanted to back up and go tell about when we were still out at Uncle Philip's place by Castle Ford, or north of Castle Ford. One year, I believe it was the first year, near the last year we was there, it snowed, and I know it snowed from 12 to 14 inches overnight. Well, we didn't know whether to go to school or not, but me being a boy, I thought it was pretty smart. I'll go to school. So I got there. But there wasn't hardly anybody there at school that day. But anyway, the next Sunday, we had a neighbors named Martha. They had some boys, and we each had a couple of dogs. We went up on that butte where we lived, close by there, and hunted jackrabbits with these dogs. The dogs could run through the snow, but the jackrabbits couldn't, because it was so soft they wouldn't. And the dogs could catch up to them. And we got, I think it was 28 jackrabbits that day.
It's a story of it.
Yeah. Also, we spent a lot of time playing on that butte. And we'd walk around in there, and every now and then we'd find. But anyway, there was coyotes on that butte. They would come down close to the house, and we had a collie dog, and I tried to get that collie dog to go after that coyote. And you think she'd go after it? She knew better, I guess. She wouldn't do it. She wouldn't. After we moved to Yonder Lee again, I get to kind of ahead of myself sometimes, but he used to have a lot of fun there. There was a fellow across the coulee there named Harold Bix. He and I had more darn fun. We'd make bow and arrows out of cattails, shoot them up in the air, just you could almost shoot them out of sight. We made the bow out of a piece of locust tree, and we put a nail in the end of the cattails. It was kind of spongy on the inside, and we just put a nail in the end not to pierce anything, but just to make weight, to hold that end straight, and whether sure we'd go up in the air. We used to, at night, he'd get on a post over there, and I'd get on post. We'd stand on top of the posts, and we'd talk back and forth. We thought that was great. And when we wanted something to do, there was a derrick. There were several derricks around the country, and for pleasure and fun, we'd climb up the middle of the derrick and get on the boom and climb clear up to the top end and then slide down the cables. Boy, did we have a thrill out of that. Sometimes the cables were had slivers on them and had to go kind of easy. But that was the way we had fun. We'd go swimming in the creek, and
Canal, sure.
well, it was a coulee there. Yeah, there wasn't any canal close. But anyway, and let's see, while we were there, when we lived there before, Dad had fixed a pump. We had some high land on the place, and he had fixed a way to pump the water up over the hill and on the other side to irrigate some ground that was high land. Couldn't get water to it only by pumping. And the material was there. He never did get the job done before we moved out to that other place. So when I came back, I said, well, I'd try that. So I went over there and plowed the ground, rocky as the dickens. I picked the rock off and seeded it to wheat. And so then I fixed up the pump and had one of these little engines that you crank. It's a putt engine. And it pumped the water up and run across this ditch, across the hill, and over on this other land. Then I'd go over and set the water. And somehow or other at night, I had to run it night and day because to get the water, get the field water. But at night, a lot of times it would stop. I'd be sound asleep when I'd hear that thing stop. I'd have to jump up and run up there and start it up again. It seemed to have a dry valve or something. One of the valves would get dry and stick. Of course, then it would die. I finally got a crop on there. I think it made 40 bushel, which I thought was pretty darn good wheat. And let's see. I guess that I'll let Lois tell some now.
When we lived in Twin Falls, Ruth and Clarence and I went to the biblical schools, all right, and Steve went to the high school there, and that's when the high school was when O'Leary school was, junior high, but that was the high school then. But we lived in town. The Baptist ministers was across the alley from us. And they had 4 children. And one big deal, we'd get together and play school. And Steve was in high school, but he had just as much fun as the rest of us. And we'd play school every night, or there were times we kind of played house and divided up and had different homes, but I don't know. I don't remember of any time in my life, the childhood, where I had so much fun with other children because we lived so far from other people in the country that we had only our own family to play with, which we enjoyed very much, but that was a special fun. And the Henrys always were close friends with us. After that, when we moved to the country, they often came out there. The children would spend weeks. They had Weston and Herbert and Ruth and Louise. And then we moved to the country. It was out near the river where we had one of our great things of doing every spring was going down to the river. And we'd climbed down the rocks till the place was called Crocus Flats. And in April or May, I forgot when it was, there would be the first little, there was a place, must have been about down 100 feet or 2 feet from the top, just covered with crocuses. Then there was a little trail down to the river we often went on. But that was the first thing we wanted to do every spring was go down there where it was nice. Shoshone Falls that was before they had American Falls Dam. And so there was always falls going over the river, water going over the falls then. First thing I heard every morning was the roar of Shoshone Falls, and always there's a big mist over it. And that was a great thrill. To go to Shoshone Falls, all the young men would take their dates and go to Shoshone Falls with their horse and buggy. In those days, it was quite an affair to go to Shoshone Falls. They had a hotel down there, and it was quite a resort area at that time. That was before we came to Buell. Then when I was I had a teacher in the 5th grade in Twin Falls. I would say the best teacher I ever had. Her name was Elizabeth Powers. And she was great on teaching poetry. And I never had cared for poetry till I had her. And after I was in her room, I knew a lot of poetry. I never learned that much again in my life, and I still remember a great deal of it. She was, I considered one of the best teachers I ever had. Then in the 6th grade, I had a teacher called Agnes Brose. And she had lived at Rock Creek, and her father had built a house out there that became a monument. He was a German, and he had built quite a house out that way. And after, I think it was only about 5 years ago, we went out to visit her. She was in her 90s, I believe. And she said she remembered me, but she only had me that 1 year. But we went out and she showed us her house and all of the antiques that she had. They brought some from Germany, and she had quite a collection. That was quite a house, 2-story. It must have been about, well, this isn't important, but that was interesting. But I skipped over a lot of part of our life.
I wanted to tell about some of the things I did when we was on the Yonder D. I was a great hand to invent things to do. I built a pair of stilts one time, and I got so I could walk on them pretty good. So I decided they wasn't tall enough. So I made them about 3 or 4 feet from the bottom. The step was about 4 feet from the ground. And to get on them, I had to get on top of the chicken house. And I had more fun walking around those tall stilts.
You walked to school and once, didn't you?
Yeah, I went out one time. I thought, well, I'll walk across the coulee, which was quite rocky, and heck, I got along so fine that evening I went after the cows. They were over the far end of the pasture, and I went over there, and boy, those cows took out for their tails in the air. They were scared to death of me. I sure had a good laugh out of that. I got the cows over there real quick. Also, Harold Fix, he built him some too. And we walked to school on those darn stilts, which was OSC, is 1, 2, 3, about 3.5 miles. And I'll tell you, my instep was sure sore when I got there, but of course, I had the stilts there and I had to walk them back. And of course, during noon hour and recess, I performed on those stilts for the kids there at school, which I was a pretty good hand at, performing for people. Out at Sunset View, they got to call me Monkey Allen, which I didn't like very well, but I couldn't help it. Anyway, while we were at Yonder Lee, my mother decided, let's see, I think Mr. Fix was driving the school wagon to, I spoke about Harold, it was his dad. He was driving the school wagon and he finally quit. So my mother decided to drive the school wagon. She drove it for several years, and after I quit school, I drove it quite a few times. I had more darn fun driving that school wagon. There was 1 or 2 guys on the wagon. They'd get on, just dare me to run away from them. And they'd get a little bit further back and a little bit further back, and I wouldn't pay no attention to them and all of a sudden I'd whip the horses and away we'd go, and I'd run away from them several times. One of the guys was Ray Duncan. No, it wasn't Ray Duncan. It was, gosh, who was it?
Max.
Max Cruz?
Max Cruz, and me, what of them?
Anyway, I had a lot of fun running away from them guys. I wouldn't wait for them either. They had to walk clear to school if they got left behind. But, Ray Duncan, he'd sit up in the front seat with me. There was a front seat in front where you sat and drove. And I was giving him a Dutch rub most of the time, but standing him on his head, and he wouldn't fight back much, but he seemed to enjoy it. And I don't know, I wasn't much of a school wagon driver, but I got by with it. But anyway, one time, how was it? I guess Mother was driving, or somebody else was driving, and I had a fella down on the road we was playing out behind. We spent more time running behind it than we did riding it. Anyway, fellow by the name of Frank Freeman, he decided to rough me up a little bit because he was quite a little older than I was. And he got through and he said, "Mox, finish him off." That was Mox Cruz. So Mox come with his teeth sticking out, and he had big buck teeth, and he was going to fix me on it, or really work me over. I let him have it on the cheek. We had quite a little squabble. Anyway, we settled that for a while, but that evening, his dad brought Mox. We lived right about a half a mile from him, across the field. He brought Mox up there and told my dad about it. Of course, my dad was sympathetic with what I had done. Mox said his eye was swelled shut. He couldn't see out of one of them. And I had to apologize to him, which I didn't figure I had it. It was necessary for me to do it because he jumped onto me. I was only protecting myself, but anyway, I never did feel too good about that. But after that, we was good friends. He sure respected me. He was bigger than me, by the way.
Quite a bit larger, wasn't he?
Yeah. Anyway, he was always a good friend after that. But
Grace, she felt sorry that you had to apologize to Matt.
Yeah.
She was afraid to tell him, to speak up and tell him what really happened, because
yeah.
she felt sorry about it.
Anyway, I think we better quit for tonight, don't you?
I know we did.
It's getting kind of late. Okay.
Okay, this is Saturday, January the 31st, 1987, and I have a few questions to ask you, Daddy.
Okay. Shoot.
You didn't mention about your being adopted. Can you what was your foster mother's name and your foster father's, and where were you in the adoption home, etc.?
Well, my foster father and mother were Dr. and Mrs. Albert Nelson. He was a practicing doctor in Iowa, Manson. And they decided that the stress of being a doctor was too much. He just was too conscientious and couldn't take when anyone died. It just killed him. Anyway, he decided not to continue being a doctor, and he got interested in Idaho. And in the meantime, they decided to adopt a boy, or they had decided to adopt a boy. And they went to the children's home in Des Moines and And I suppose they looked me over and my brother Dale.
Let me insert something.
Go ahead.
They came to the home, the people of whom you adopt. They came to the home and saw the family. And they said, we have a little boy there that looks like your children.
Oh, yeah.
And so they brought Earl over for them to see. And
So they decided to take me, and after they had me a while, I seemed to be bothered, and I was worried about being alone and waiting Gail.
Can I insert?
Yeah,
They said you talked all the time about Gail.
yeah.
Said all the time he mentioned Gail.
How old were you?
I was about 4, 5. Between 4 and 5, I can't remember. Anyway, they decided maybe they'd better take Gail too, so they did. I don't know whether they adopted him or not, but they took him. And we came to Idaho, and Gail was, well, the combination of Gail and me just about drove my folks crazy, because they had 2 girls and we were 2 boys. There wasn't anything we didn't get into and do that we hadn't ought to do. Gail was especially bad, as I remember. We had a sow had some pigs, and he continually teased this sow so much that throwing sticks at her and everything till she ate up her pigs. That didn't go over too good, but there was a lot of things that happened that finally they decided that they couldn't. I don't know how long Gail was with us, but they decided that they would have to send him back. So there was a man from the home. They wrote me and contacted this man. And I remember his name was Mr. Slingerland. And he came out and picked Gail out and took him. And I told about him going up the hill, and what Mother said. So that's the.
How did you come out from Iowa? Did you come on a train?
Oh yeah, I forgot that too. That was on that other. See, okay, we came with my father and my foster father and Albert Carlson, who was a friend. They came on their immigrant car, which had the machinery and the household goods and let's see, I think maybe a cow or 2 or horses. I don't know whether there was animals on it or not. But anyway, they came on that, and Mother and the girls and Gail and I came on the train. And one thing I remember on the train, we came through the Royal Gorge. And as we pulled into the Royal Gorge, the Mother said to us, be sure and look this over. This is very spectacular. And so I was especially interested in it because later we went over there about 5 or 6 years ago and saw that. And it is quite a sight. Anyway, the train ran in the bottom of
The gorge.
gorge. I don't think there was a bridge over the top of it then. But I can't remember getting here at all in the Buell.
What was Grandma Nelson's first name?
Ada
Collins.
Collins was
You know-
her.
Do you know where they were from, or they lived in Iowa all their lives?
No, she lived in Minnesota, in Lake City, Minnesota. And I don't know how she got acquainted with my dad. But anyway,
Why were you put in the orphan's home?
Well, when I was 4, soon after this time that we had, I told you about the time that we got scared in the house and tore out of there. Soon after that, why, Mother left us. I don't know what she left for, but she just pulled out.
I heard she left with another man.
Well, anyway, we were left, and my dad tried to take care of us, and he decided he couldn't do it and worked too. He worked on the railroad. He was either an engineer or a fireman. I don't know which it was.
Can I inject something?
Yeah?
The city complained that your kids were running wild.
Yeah, well, he was. I can remember that.
Is this in Madison City or Des Moines? I mean,
Mason City.
Mason City.
Mason City, yeah. Des Moines is where the children's home was. Anyway, where was I?
Your dad was trying to take care of.
Oh, yeah. And he decided that it was impossible to do it and still work. So I believe that Gladys went to my mother. She evidently showed up sometime or other and took Gladys, but they decided to put us 2 boys in the orphan's home there in Des Moines. And I can remember a little about the home. I don't think I was there too long, but anyway, about the first thing I remember when I was there, they took us into a room that had quite a bunch of clothes in it, shoes and stuff. They outfitted us with stuff to wear, extra clothes. And I can still remember the smell of that room. It smelled a certain way. So while I was there, I had to go to the bathroom, and I wasn't acquainted with the place. Well, of course, I was with Gail all the time, but we didn't know where the bathroom was or anything.
When you first got there.
I really had to go, and I couldn't hold it, so I had an accident. Boy, that was a mess.
Did you get scolded for it, punished for it?
I don't remember. I sure don't remember.
Do you remember any bad treatment or good treatment in the orphan's home? Were they good to you?
Yeah, they were good to you, as far as I can remember. But it seemed like it was awful strict. I wasn't used to being told what to do much, because I'd rather be kind of wild. So that's all I can remember about the orphan's home.
How come you kept your name?
Oh, that was my foster father's idea, and I've always been happy that he made this decision. He said, being a boy, I think he should carry his own name.
Is your middle name really Elmer?
And no, that is a manufactured name from somewhere, I don't know.
Gladys, but Goldie, the half-sister, told me that one of the boys had the middle name of Elmer and the other one Fredson, and they were not given to them when they were put in the orphanage home. They were only given their first name. But she didn't know which was to which.
I don't go too much on what Goldie said.
What about your birthday? Didn't you say that you weren't sure on your birthday?
Yeah, it seemed to be a little mixed up on Gail's and my both birthday, but they finally settled on the 21st of March.
Didn't you get your pick of which day you wanted, the 21st or the 28th?
No.
His father didn't have him straight when he put him in the home. He gave Earls just the 21st of March, and Gail's is the 25th. And somebody else said that was wrong. I believe it was Gladys, or his mother, said it wasn't right, that Earl's was the 25th, and Gail's was the 21st. And Earl had always, that was on his record, so he kept it. Okay.
Okay, Daddy, you said that when you came out here, you came with two sisters.
No, they were Marie and Lillian. Marie was the oldest, and Lillian was the next. Then after we moved to Yonder Lee, why, Rachel
Florence.
and Florence and Rachel, Florence came first, and then Rachel, were born on the Yonder Lee. In those days, they didn't go to a hospital. We didn't go to a hospital. They just had the baby at home.
Did Grandpa Nelson help with the delivery?
Yeah.
He did it.
'cause
He did the
He was the, yeah. And he also had quite a bit of medicine when he came to this country. He brought a lot with him. The neighbors asked him quite a bit for advice, and he would dole out medicine to them.
But he did telling no. What's her name? He never, I mean, all those close neighbors involved the return.
I can't think who you're talking about.
Brack.
Brackett?
It's Brackett.
Oh, yeah.
He did never tell him Brackett.
Yeah. Yeah, he was well thought of in the neighborhood. Everybody liked Mr. Nelson. He was a very gracious and quiet and very, very nice man. Everybody respected him very much.
Mother, a while ago you were talking about Mrs. Burroughs. Her first name was Clara, by the way. Clara
Yes,
Burroughs.
that's right. I couldn't think of Elizabeth last night. I could only think of Agnes.
You had a memory of her when she was your teacher.
Yes, she was so very proper. But she had two beautiful taffeta dresses, made beautifully. And she wore one week and the other the other week. And I can always tell when she was coming down the aisle, her skirts rustled all of her, those taffeta dresses. I could hear her walk around the room with the rustling of her taffeta dresses.
When two of you came out here to Idaho, did you have electricity in your house? Did you have running water?
No. When we first came to Idaho, I'll tell you, it was, my mother had been used to electricity, water in the house, telephone, all the conveniences, and we had
Nothing.
nothing. We drank ditch water. Of course, we had the boiler, but it was out of the ditch. We didn't even have a cistern. And
When you say ditch water, where did this water come from? Is it Snake River?
canal water, with ditches.
Well,
Right.
you guys remember when you came here to Idaho, do you remember the Thousand Springs? Did you ever go down and see that? Do you remember your first impression of it?
No. When we first came here, we didn't travel any place because we were in wagon, We didn't even have a buggy when we first came. It was just, if we went any place, we went in a wagon. I remember we went down to Clear Lakes after apricots, that Madeline farm. And I remember eating so many apricots I got sick. And that's the only place we went besides to Bounce Rock. I remember going down to Bounce Rock one time with a wagon. And that was when the grade was in a different place than it is now. And it was quite steep. And my dad drove the wagon down. And when they got to the top, why, everybody got out because they was scared to ride down in the wagon. He put on the brakes, slid the wheels all the way down the grade. We went over there, and I remember Josie. That's Philip, the person my dad's brother's wife, Philip. Josie was his wife. She was with us, and we went on to Bounce Rock. And I can remember climbing up there and with her. And we still have a picture of us standing up there under that rock. And then we camped down at the bridge. There was no fill then. There was just a bridge there. And we camp down there. That was our first trip down to Balance Rock, I believe.
Not your last.
I can't remember the first time I saw Thousand Springs, but I already knew about it from reputation.
You mean Social Falls?
Thousand
No,
Springs.
Thousand Springs.
Oh,
It does, because Dad had told us about it. He had come through this country, and when he got to Thousand Springs, he said he thought it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Because they'd gone through desert and desert and desert, and got there, and that was such a beautiful, refreshing sight.
There's a story about Grandpa Grab riding horses out to Idaho. And he was so sad sore. When was that when he came out?
Well, they came out when he was 18, and I think he drove a wagon out. But when they went back, he rode a horse all the time. And they took back a bunch of wild horses. And he herded them back, and after they got back there, he started breaking them. And he helped break all those horses to ride so they could sell them.
And he never rode horseback again, did he? Said he
I
was
don't think
sad.
he ever rode a horseback again. Never. And he hunted a lot on that trip, and he never, I think once or twice he shot a pheasant. But as far as I know, he had a gun. He never,
Daddy, you said at one time that you thought we were part Indian. What do you think?
well, I don't know, but that's what I've always been told, that I was part Indian.
Who told you, your mom or your dad?
Well, Gail did most of the talking. I don't remember whether my mother and dad said anything about it, but Gail insisted that we were, I think, 1/16th Indian, and I was always kind of proud of the fact. I don't know why, but anyway.
his father was a doctor and quite a philosopher, and he said that Earl walked like an Indian. He was always sure that Earl must be part Indian, the way he looked and the way he walked.
His foster father said that
His
Yeah.
foster father. He said he acted like an Indian and looked like an Indian.
Mother, one time you told us that we were related to J.L. Lee.
I can't tell you exactly how that was, but I believe it was through my mother, father. I believe it was that way, so my mother's father. But I can't remember. I had heard, but I don't remember how it was, but we were related to him.
When did you move to Beulah in Twin Falls, you and your family?
I was 13. It was 1916. 1916, no. We came to Idaho when I was 10. So that was 1912. So we came to Beulah when I was over. It must have been 1915.
What house where'd you move to?
We moved to right where we live. Dad came, he had bought this place. Dad bought this place where we lived down there. And so through the winter, he and Nestle came up here and started building this necessary building. It was not a very large house. And he built it just one room then, and Mom put up curtains to make separations. But
Did he buy this place or did he homestead it?
he bought it. It was already taken. It
Had
hadn't been.
the sagebrush been cleared?
There was just a little place where it was sagebrush.
And he bought the whole 80 acres?
Yes, he bought the whole 80 acres. And that's why we still own the place in Oklahoma. But, so he didn't have much to go down on it. But we moved here and he farmed that summer after that. And then the next winter, next fall, he bought that place over 2 miles east of here, where I went to high school. And for a few years, we farmed both places.
Did anybody live in this house? Or were you living?
Well, after we moved over there, nobody did, but we'd come and live in this house while we were doing farm work over here. One of us would come over and keep house for them. And I often did. Came over and kept house for them when they worked over here. It seemed like most of the time I did. And it was 14 at that time. And then it was during the war, World War I, came on about that time. And so we had to all work at that time on the farm. I remember we chopped wheat and did the farm work. Did all those big things that had to be done like that. The whole family got out and chopped wheat. The whole family got out and do all kinds of things. They went to